I, in turn, would like to thank Robert Fish, Kazuko Minamoto, and Ariana Moir from the Japan Society for co-sponsoring this event and giving us this wonderful auditorium with this great live stream, YouTube. So let's give us a hand for the Japan Society. As Robert said, I'm the founder of Youth Arts New York, the sponsor of Hibakusha Stories. Hibakusha Stories has brought over 80 atomic bomb survivors to over 100 high schools in all 5 boroughs of New York City, reaching 12,000 students. Hibakusha is the word used to describe atomic bomb survivor. We come here today with a combination of heart and mind and body. Our minds lead us to the conclusion that we have a responsibility to work together to see that nuclear weapons are never used again. Our hearts bind us and sustain us. This group that we have created from all aspects of the nuclear bomb, from the creators of the nuclear bomb to the people who deployed, who actually dropped the bomb, to the survivors of the bomb, we are all connected through our hearts. And we are here because of the health and well-being of our bodies and the body of the land and the sea and the sky upon which we breathe. So we are honored to share this time with you, and we thank your schools and your teachers for bringing us together for this historic educational experience. When I was in high school, my teacher, Mr. Bechtel, had us read the book Hiroshima. Has anyone here read that book? I highly recommend it. It's very short, and it was so profound that it changed my life, and that's why I'm here today. So that the act of a teacher and reading something in school at your age can completely change the arc of your life. As you all probably know, on August 6th of 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, we dropped the bomb on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. And 4 days later, the war came to an end. I think it was 5 days later. The purpose of our work is not to debate why the United States dropped the bomb. Some people will say it was to keep keep Russia from annexing lands in Japan. Some people say it was to test the bomb. Some people say it was to save hundreds of thousands of American and Japanese lives to avoid a land invasion. That's not our concern. Those questions will be debated forever, and they will never be completely resolved. Our concern is not to debate the past, but to inform you about the unique effects of nuclear weapons and the nuclear fuel chain, and to empower you to do something about it. So there are 3 main lessons we would like to impart to you today. And one is that people have the ability to turn bitter hatred into loving kindness, friendship, and peace. We are here now as people who a generation ago were enemies. Think of the people in our day and time that we think are mortal enemies, that we will always hate them, they will always hate us. What you're going to see today is an example that that doesn't need to be the case. That does not need to happen. Within a lifetime, people can transform that. My father was on a ship on the way to the Philippines fighting his mortal enemy, the Japanese, in World War II. By the end of his life, my father was engaged in friendship, sports exchanges with the Japanese. So that within your lifetime, we can turn these bitter hatreds into friendship. Number 2 is we have a responsibility to remember. When we taught at Grace Church School this morning, and I mentioned that I was of a generation where we suddenly saw our world, people died of AIDS. All of my world was dying of AIDS. We were right down there at Cooper Union at Astor Place, and my friends who were dying said, "Remember me." So you now have the opportunity not just to learn about about history in the books, but you have an opportunity to have people who have told you their stories. They are transmitting their stories to you. So these are no longer just their stories. These are your stories. And their plea and our plea to you is remember. It is we so respect you. My 30 years in the New York City public schools, you're the finest people I've ever seen in my life. If the whole world was like New York City school kids, we would have a great world. I know you might have problems among yourself right now, but as a whole, you guys are amazing. So we have so much faith and love in you that we are now trusting you to carry forward this story. And the third thing we wish to impart to you is that nuclear weapons are morally unacceptable, and we have a responsibility to create a world without them. There are 9 countries that have nuclear weapons. Can someone name some of them? United States, Russia, Israel, France, North Korea, Pakistan, India, China, and what did I miss? And Israel. There are 9 countries today that have nuclear weapons. There are approximately 19,000 nuclear weapons in the world, 2,000 of them at hair trigger alert. That means that within minutes they could be deployed, that is, they could be used. They are controlled by people and computers. As you know, people can make mistakes, and as we all know, computers can make mistakes too. Nuclear weapons are made of plutonium. Plutonium is a radioactive isotope that releases invisible radiation. It takes over 240,000 years for plutonium to completely disintegrate. Radioactive plutonium can cause cancer and genetic mutations. Therefore, the deployment of nuclear weapons is not just waging war in the present, but it is waging war against the future. Because radiation can cause mutations in the gene pool that are irreversible. You cannot go back. There is no pill. There is no operation. Generations of survivors live with a constant concern. Will I get cancer? Will my children get cancer? Will my grandchildren get cancer? Will my children be born with birth defects? Plutonium is created by nuclear power plants. Tons of radioactive plutonium are stored in cooling pools in these plants. Most of these plants are aging and were developed hastily without proper safety measures. We have a plant 25 miles north of us in the Bronx. Does anyone know the name of that plant? It's called Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant. You should know that. Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant. A tsunami in Japan in March 11th, 2 years ago, caused an earthquake caused a tsunami that destroyed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. That plant was of the same design as Indian Point nuclear power plant. An area of 20 kilometers around Fukushima was evacuated, and that land, a beautiful rural land of Japan, is now a dead zone for generations. The United States government recommended that citizens within 50 kilometers of Fukushima evacuate. If such an accident were to happen at Indian Point nuclear power plant, and that could either be, they found out now that it is on an earthquake fault. Also, the cooling ponds are holding radioactive plutonium. If a conventional weapon was used by an enemy of the United States, that could release enormous amounts of radioactive plutonium. There is no plan to evacuate New York City. Think of getting every single person out of New York City in case of such an accident. It is impossible. That is why we believe nuclear weapons are so unique and morally unacceptable, and why we ask for their elimination from the world. I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment. Okay, I see some eyes open. I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment. Think of that place in the world that you most love. The place that is the absolute, that makes your heart sing. I'd like it completely silent for a minute as you go to that place, what it feels like, what it looks like. And now think of what you love about being alive. What is it that makes your heart sing? What is it that makes you love being awake in the day? And now imagine, all of that could be destroyed in an instant with a nuclear weapon. And that is why we do the work we do today. We wonder, what can we do? It's an overwhelming situation. What can we do? There's some very hopeful signs on the horizon. Earlier this year in Oslo, Norway, more than 120 governments, U.S. agencies, UN agencies, and non-governmental organizations met to discuss the humanitarian dimensions of nuclear weapons. The Red Cross warned that no response exists nor could ever be developed to respond effectively in the event of a single nuclear bomb. There could never be a plan to evacuate New York City nor care for its injured citizens, since most hospitals and medical personnel and much of the infrastructure, the roads, the electricity, the bridges, the tunnels, would be destroyed. Therefore, these countries are calling for a treaty to ban nuclear weapons, not to slowly get rid of them, but to completely ban nuclear weapons. I highly urge you, after today's program, to go to the website of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. You can Google ICAN, I-C-A-N, and then just put nuclear, and that website will come up. And there you will find an enormous amount of information of what you can really do to make sure that nuclear weapons are never used again. So we've done our part. We've come from Mexico, we've come from Japan, we've come from places far away. We're waking up at 5 in the morning to go from school to school to school. Some of us are in our 80s. So we have done what we have, and the rest is up to you. And when I look out and see who you are, I think we're in good hands. So I thank you for your attention, and I'd like to introduce our guests. In the audience, we have Reiko Yamada. Ms. Yamada survived the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. She is a leader in the nuclear bomb survivors of Japan, and she is one of the most extraordinary and strong and dignified and loving human beings you would ever want to meet. So I really salute and tip my hat to Reiko Yamada. We changed the program a little bit. So our next guest, and maybe he can come up onto the stage now, is Clifton Truman Daniel, a New York native. He was born and raised in this neighborhood, who's a Chicago-based journalist, who is the eldest grandson of President Harry S. Truman, the president who dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Who's sitting next to him? Next we have Shigeko Sasamori from Hiroshima, who was an 11-year-old girl when the bomb dropped and was later one of 25 girls who was brought to the United States by the Quakers and Mount Sinai Hospital for reconstructive surgeries. She stayed in the United States and lives in Los Angeles, California. And then it's Cynthia. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Cynthia Miller. So Dr. Miller's father was an engineer who worked on the development of the bomb. And Dr. Miller is an is an expert in brain science and the transformation of trauma and anger into positive well-being and energy. And finally, I'd like to introduce Coonley. He was a Korean resident of Japan who was 16 years old at the time of the bombing. Instead of having each tell their story, Clifton, Mr. Daniel, will tell us how he got involved in this project, and then he's going to be asking our guests questions that they will answer. And then we will open it up to questions and answers to you also. As you are listening, we ask that you think of some questions that you would like to ask and not be shy about asking them. Thank you so much for your attention and your being here.